Hello, this is Brian P., and welcome to Scaling the Well. Lying is wrong. I know, obvious. We all agree that lying or to tell a lie is wrong. Um, we get enraged when people are dishonest with us, trying to deceive us. If you ask anybody what's their one deal breaker, um, more often than not, it's going to be lying or somebody who's being dishonest. So basically the same thing. But why is that? So sometimes I like doing these little thought experiments because there's certain things that it seems we have a consensus on. Um, for example, lying is wrong. But why? Why do we feel that way? Why is it so historic? Why is lying basically the plot of every television show, every hack writer? If you watch like a just your basic sitcom or even a dramatic series like a superhero show on the CW or something, most of the plots have to do with, hey, you know, don't tell so and so this, because I don't want them to hurt their feelings, or I don't want them to find out that I'm actually fighting crime at night, or I don't want them to do this, or if you tell somebody this, it's really going to hurt her, or blah blah blah. How many? Look, if you just look at any TV show that you watch, you'll find that concept or a similar concept probably 3 or 4 times, just throughout a season, just for that one show. Sometimes even multiple times within an episode. That's why good writing doesn't depend on that cliche of not telling somebody something, and yet everybody continues to watch these shows because everyone can relate to it. It's like, oh, you should have told her, you should have told him, blah blah blah. When I was first starting in martial arts, my instructor told me that we should be able to not just do a move and generalize it. He could teach us a move and we could execute it, and hopefully we could execute it under a pressure situation, against a resisting opponent or in competition, or hopefully not, but in order to protect ourselves on the street. But once you get to the level of an instructor, you should be able to break down that particular technique into its finer components. So an example of that would be, let's say, the armbar. In 2018, most people know what an armbar is, believe it or not, because of the UFC, probably largely because of Ronda Rousey back in her heyday. But if you just look at it, if you haven't studied martial arts, it's basically, you see, her just grabbing someone's arm and throwing her leg over someone's head, and then the person tapping, or her opponent's arm being broken, and that actually happened a few times. So, but if you study jiu-jitsu or judo for any amount of time, you should be able to actually break down that armbar. So let's say you're doing it from the guard. You have to break your opponent's posture. If they have good posture, you can't do a submission on them, at least not easily. You have to break their posture and get them off their base. You have to be able to secure the arm. You have to make sure that you secure it in a way that they can't get it back. You have to be able to position yourself to where they don't get their posture back. And then you have to be able to apply leverage. And then how do you apply that leverage? So there's probably, if you're good, you can break down an armbar into probably 6, 7 different components. There's some people who could break it down into, 15, 20 different components. And then there's different types of arm bars, and there's counters. What if they counter this way? Then this is what you do, and blah, blah, blah. So I want to do that with certain concepts and certain elements that are in just part of the human experience. And I think lying is a big one of them. When I was a child, I saw this movie, Camelot, and I saw it on TV actually, but I don't know if it was in the theaters too or not, but it was a good movie, King Arthur and all that. But I remember towards the beginning of the movie, there was Merlin, and I don't remember the exact context. I think it was something like he was asked, what's the worst thing a man can do or something, and he responds, and I'm paraphrasing because again I don't remember exactly, but he responds that to lie would be the worst thing because when you lie, a part of the world dies. I thought, wow, that's dramatic even for a movie about ancient England. You know, that's really dramatic. So, and then I started thinking about that. Not recently, but within the last few years, the concept has come up, and you see so many people getting angry at lies, and why it invokes such emotion in us, and why is it such the deal breaker? Why is that the red line for so many of us? And I kind of came up with the fact that, well, basically when you lie, essentially what you're doing is you're taking away the free will of another person, even if it's for a moment. If you look at the horrible things in society, you look at slavery, you look at sex trafficking, you look at people who are in the victims of domestic violence, they're in domestic violence relationships. We all think those are horrid things because basically it's somebody, having control over another person against their will. And that's what you're doing with a lie. And now one of the things we use to justify lying is that, well, maybe that wasn't a big lie or a little lie. Well, since free will can't be quantified, there really is no big or little lie. It's binomial. You're either trying to take away their free will or you're not. And what do I mean by taking away their free will? Well, you're not giving the other person the chance to make this to make an informed decision due to you giving them false information. So if you're giving somebody false information because you're trying to avoid the consequences of them making an informed decision. And when you do that, that person, at least for a moment, it could be longer, but at least for that moment, that person's your slave because you are now controlling the outcome or avoiding an outcome by altering what they think or what they should be able to think. So let's say what we could consider a small lie. And again, there are no big or small lies because free will is not big or small. It's not quantifiable, right? So it's subjective as to what a big or a small lie is. Let's say you and your partner agree to be healthier, and you do that, and then one day at work, you basically were busy, you had a lot of meetings that day or whatever, and you just grab McDonald's because it was quick, and you eat McDonald's at your desk. Okay, and then you get home, and your partner asks you, well, what'd you have for lunch today? What'd you do for lunch? And you say, a bunch of people from work, chipped in and they brought salads. I had a salad. Well, you're doing that to avoid what you would consider a negative consequence. And that negative consequence could be your partner nagging at you or browbeating you, saying, we agreed to eat healthier and we haven't even done this a week and you're already eating McDonald's, and you think that's a negative consequence. So we're not going to give them that information. We're not going to give them the correct information that would give them the ammunition to nag us. So when I got married, before I got married, this is actually way before I got married, my wife used to tell little white lies. And that's what we call them, right? We call them little white lies. And again, it's kind of going back on what I said, right? Because there are no big lies or little lies. They're just lies. they're to lie or not to lie. It's binomial. But I think she thought that they were little white lies. And she wasn't even telling most of them to me. I busted her a couple times. And I told her I was going to talk about this. And she was just like, why do you got to talk about me? But I think we both got kind of an education from it because what happened is that there were just little things, like I would say things like, why do you have to go to that store? Or why do you got to, do this, because there was things that she was used to doing and that I thought was stupid or something. We get judgmental even as partners. And she didn't want to have to explain herself to me, and it wasn't like big things, it wasn't like, she was out with another guy or something like that. It was just like, maybe I thought, she shouldn't have to pick somebody, like pick up a friend or pick up a family member or something like that. And so she would just be like, I just came straight home, or I did this, because I'd be like, she didn't want to hear me say, you know what, you should, because I'm one of those people, and it's something that I had to work on. I'd be like, you know what, because sometimes she would do things she didn't like to do, but she would do them anyway, right? And so, because she likes to avoid conflict, and so I'm all about. I don't like conflict either, but because of my professions, child welfare and human resources, you realize that if you avoid conflict, something worse will happen in the future. So I'm all about, even if it's uncomfortable, engaging in conflict and doing it once instead of having to do it over and over and over, or what's worse, avoid it over and over and over. I'd rather have one awkward or uncomfortable moment instead of a lifetime of awkward or uncomfortable moments. And so that's kind of my style, and it's not something I was born with. It's something I've learned over time. And so she wasn't there, she didn't have those type of professions, and she's very non-confrontational. She's also very much a pleaser. So she would do things for people that I would think, you don't have to do that, And so sometimes she would do things and not want to tell me, and it wasn't big things. It would be like picking somebody up, or grabbing, lunch for someone or whatever, or volunteering for something, that I think, knowing that she didn't want to do it. And it wasn't that I was against her doing these particular things. I'm against people doing things that they don't want to do. If you don't want to do something, you should just tell somebody you don't want to do it. And so she would lie to me and just say, oh, she didn't do something, even though I would have, because she married an investigator, I would already know and again, I shouldn't do this either. You shouldn't do this with your partner. I'm not claiming that any of this is healthy, but I would already have evidence and then ask her and then see if she would lie to me, and she was like, oh yeah, and then I would bust her with the evidence. And then, it's a good way for someone not to lie to you, right? Because now she'll just openly, Brian, I'm doing this, and I don't want to do it, but I've agreed to do it. And I've learned to just accept the fact that, sometimes, you just have to let people do what they want to do, and whatever. But we did start talking about the concept of lying. I'm like, and again, most of these things weren't towards me. I could hear her lying to other members of her family sometimes, and I'll be like, just tell them the truth. Well, if I tell them the truth, they're going to blah, blah, blah. And then I'm going to get in an argument. And then I'm like, so what? Which brings me to my second point. So the first point was, when you lie, you take away the free will of another person. But the second point is, we don't lie. And, every podcast I say this. If you only learn this one thing, blah, 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 blah. Well, this is the one thing. We don't lie to people who don't have power over us, So when you lie, it's an insecurity of yours, of the liar, A lot of people, so think of the conspiracy theorists out there today, the people who always say that they're worried about the government's lying to us about this, or the government's lying to us about that. I agree that the government probably does lie about a lot of stuff. Politicians lie, so, certain government institutions may lie about things, or at least lies of omission, right? They're not going to report stuff that may affect our lives, right? And I don't think that that's right. But what I think is worse, what the conspiracy theorists, and this is really ironic. A lot of the modern day conspiracy theorists, a lot of them kind of have this conservative bent, and I'm not saying that I'm not saying that all conspiracy theorists are conservative. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that a lot of them have this kind of these same people who are worried that the government is lying to us also like these straight shooters, people like Vladimir Putin or Netanyahu, or, I don't even think they're straight shooters either, but they like these tough guy type of world leaders. And I said, people don't lie to people who don't have any power over them, Worry about it. What you should really be scared about is when your government doesn't lie to you at all. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but if your government just starts killing people in the street and they're like, yeah, we did it. If somebody disappears and when somebody criticizes Vladimir Putin and they end up shot in front of the Kremlin, he kind of gives a wink and a nod to the international community, but everyone knows he did it. He doesn't go out there and like, please believe me, I don't know, because he wants you to know. And that's because he doesn't believe that his people have a lot of power over him. Our government is still somewhat scared of the populace, which is a good thing. So this is not, I'm not trying to, go into like geopolitical type situations and conversations, but what I'm saying is that on an individual level, you're not going to lie to somebody who doesn't have any power over you. So when you lie, it's out of insecurity. So I would rather you just be upfront with them, And if I'm upfront with somebody, I'm not gonna I'm not if there's somebody who's gonna nag at me or disapprove of an action I did, I'm gonna tell them the truth, and then I'm gonna let them do whatever they're gonna do, and I have control of my actions. So yeah, I can walk away. Whatever the other person does, I'm in control of myself. So, and here's the thing: even though my wife's a pleaser, she also has a temper, and so again, like I said, I would rather have one uncomfortable moment instead of a lifetime of uncomfortable moments. Well, if my wife gets fed up with something and no one ever knows what her limit is when it comes to that, watch out. And part of the reason why when we kind of figured it out is like don't just do these things and because that's lying too. Doing something, telling somebody, hey, I'll do this, I'm fine with it, when you're not fine with it, that's also a lie, right? So it's not just the little white lies she would tell to me. It's stuff that she would tell to other people in her life, friends, family members, whatever. And so I wanted to save them from her wrath because if she got fed up with doing this, and they might not even know she doesn't like doing it, she just didn't like doing certain things and she would just do it. And so I didn't want her to lash out at them because that's ugly when that's happened. And I've seen that once or twice. Not towards me, but yeah, she has a temper. And then her family has told me stories about certain things that where her temper has come out, either her or in her family. So, yeah, it's lying is just one of those things that comes from insecurity. And so I talked about my wife. Let me talk about myself. So like I've dealt with anxiety my whole life. I've dealt with anxiety, and we could do a podcast about that. Don't get on drugs to deal with anxiety. If you're suffering from anxiety, don't get on drugs to do that. This was when I found out about this. I did some research about this when I was taking this clinical adoption class. I was adopted, and a lot of children who are adopted, they have these different types of attachment disorders, and a lot of people have heard of reactive attachment disorder or a lot of these real negative things. But most of them have what's called an anxious attachment. So it's kind of, which basically manifests itself in anxiety, like generalized anxiety. And when I was younger, I didn't like uncomfortable situations. So if somebody would ask me a question, I might just say the first thing that comes to my head, because when somebody would ask me a question, I always felt like it was an interrogation. I didn't think it was just casual conversation. And so one time, and I can't remember too many instances of this, but I remember this one time clearly that somebody, and I was about to start writing for this magazine, but I hadn't. And then somebody who was a big deal in the MMA community asked me, "Oh, so what are your hobbies and such?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a writer." "Oh, really? Have you published anything yet? Have you written anything?" And I said, "Yes." And that wasn't the truth. That was a lie. And I just said it because I was just like, I wanted to have a cool answer, and I wanted to respond quickly, and basically my brain just fired it out, and it came out of my mouth, and then of course they're like, "Oh, well, what did you publish?" And then I had to lie about that, and so, and it haunted me because that was a position of weakness. I was like, man, I was so weak. Why didn't I just tell them, no, I haven't published, but I'm working on this, and this. Who cares if they're impressed? Who cares? who cares what they think, at that point, and it bugged me. And I did go on to become, a writer, a published writer and all this. And I was in magazines and whatever. That's not even relevant. That is, and 2 years later, I met the same person and I actually told him, hey, when you first asked me, blah, 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 I actually lied to you. I wasn't published at that point. Obviously he thought I was weird for admitting that, and he's like, I don't care. I've seen your articles and stuff. You're good. So what? It wasn't significant to that person, but it was significant to me, and that stuck with me, and that's why I'm very careful with the things that I say now, because I never want to feel that way again. I never want to give in to that insecurity again. I never want to give in to that weakness, and again, we don't lie to people who don't have power over us. So, last point, a lot of people lie out of convenience, and I want to talk about the punch in the arm theory. So the punch in the arm, when two kids are playing, it's like I punch you in the arm and then you punch me in the arm. So let's say we're playing that stupid game, right? And you punch me in the arm and it doesn't hurt. And we're not really trying to hurt each other, but, whatever. And then I say, oh, okay, now it's my turn to punch you in the arm. But I'm not going to tell you when I'm going to do it. So you owe me a punch. I get to punch you, but I could do it in the next few seconds. I could do it in the next few minutes. I could do it 10 years from now. You're not going to know when. That itself is going to be so much worse than getting the actual punch in the arm. You're going to beg me to punch you right now. Just punch me. I don't want to wait, because it causes anxiety. It actually invokes a type of trauma. So when you see a couple where one person has cheated on the other person, and let's say they reconciled that relationship and they're still together, that person can never trust them more than 99%. And if it's something as big as cheating, if something as impactful as cheating, again, there are no big or little lies, but there are lies and deception that are more impactful on a person than something else, right? It's subjective, but to that person, they can judge what's impactful to them. So you do something that big that's impactful, it's not the actual cheating. It's the fact that now that they're not just worried about the other shoe dropping. Anytime you go out, anytime they don't know where you are, it's the fact that it's an infinite amount of shoes that can drop. And they're never going to 100% know if you did it again. And if you did do it again, would you disclose it and come clean and tell them the truth? That is way worse than the actual act of cheating. And that's what people are living with. And that's why you'll see these arguments in couples, and it's like, you just won't let it go. Why can't you let it go? This was 5 years ago, because it's a trauma now. And now that trauma is played over and over. That's why there's wisdom behind saying, oh, if it usually just applies to men for some reason, but it could apply to men or women. If he cheated on you, break up with him. He'll do it again. Cheater never changes, cheat or cheat again, blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying that I agree with that 100%. I think there's things that can be fixed. I think there can be a healthy relationship in a lot of circumstances that can be salvaged from that. But I see the wisdom behind it, because it is a trauma, and it's something that you're not going to be able to 100% let go, because you don't know if it's going to happen again. And it's like that punch in the arm. You don't know your whole life. You're waiting for that punch. And even if there's no more cheating and you guys live into your 90s and you die in each other's arms, that could be 60 years of anxiety of like wondering what if. And that's not pleasant. So I'm not saying that, through therapy and through other methods and good communication that can't be mitigated somewhat, but it's never going to be mitigated 100%. It's never going to be 100% erased. So yeah, it's one of those things that we all deal with, as far as anxiety, as far as our willingness to lie. But so let's just recap. One, lying takes away another person's or a group of people's free will. Two, we don't lie to people who don't have any power over us. So when we lie, it's an insecure act on our part. And three, lying can be a trauma to the other person, and it could be a lifelong trauma depending on how impactful that lie was. So that is why lying is wrong, and that's why we should try to avoid it. And that's why we should not only try to avoid it, but we should think through the things we say and the actions that we do. And if none of us are perfect, if you do make a mistake, if you do something that's going to cause someone else to be angry, it's always a good choice to just fess up and deal with that. Again, I'm not saying you deserve every negative consequence that could come from telling the truth, but you can only control yourself. And lying, that takes away the aspect of controlling ourselves. We're going to say, no, we're going to try to control the other person and not control ourselves, which flies in the face of every therapeutic method, every self-help, every act of ownership, whether it's coming from somebody who's in the military, who's a Navy SEAL, who's trying to give a motivational speech, or from somebody who's in who's in the psychotherapy field, for the social work field. We want to take ownership of our actions. And if you lie, it's basically you're not trying to take ownership. You're trying to pass on that burden to someone else by taking away correct information from them, therefore taking away their ability to make an informed decision about you. So this is Brian P. This has been Scaling the Well. See you next time.